First meeting with Prime Minister Modi started with a disagreement.
Yes, it did.
And not many people disagree openly or directly with the Prime Minister. And in fact, in your upcoming book that deals with your encounters with varied Prime Ministers and politicians, you talk about how an official in the Prime Minister's office was actually aghast that you had dared to disagree with Prime Minister Modi. Can we start there?
Yes, you can. I had got into a bad habit of speaking my mind out. And it was too late in the day. I had put in about 33 years as an IS officer when I became Coal Secretary. And I couldn't hold myself. I didn't want to hold myself. I had always been of the view that speak your mind out. Because whoever is the minister or the Prime Minister will stand to benefit from your view. He may disagree. Ultimately, he's the decision maker. But I had always believed, don't deprive him of your view. If you have a view and there is a reasoned view, come up with that. I said that. And when this occasion arose in my first meeting with the Prime Minister, I had just taken over as School Secretary, and there was a meeting organized at the residence of the Prime Minister, where there weren't very many people. The first presentation was made by the Power Secretary. And the 6 slides that he showed, in all those slides, he mentioned that the power problem was on account of coal. So then the Prime Minister turned towards me, Anil ji, आपने देखा? पावर की समस्याएं कोल की वजह से हैं. आप कोल सेक्टर को ठीक कर दीजिए, देश की आर्थिक स्थिति सुधर जाएगी. आई रिमेंबर हिज वर्ड्स. सो आई सेड, सर मैं आपसे सहमत हूं, आप सही कह रहे हैं, कोल में गंभीर समस्याएं हैं, लेकिन कदाचित ये उचित नहीं होगा कहना कि समस्त पावर की समस्याएं कोल की वजह से हैं. हमें शायद कोल के सेक्टर को, पावर के सेक्टर को कॉम्प्रिहेंसिवली देखना होगा. उन्होंने कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव शब्द पकड़ लिया और इमीडिएटली मुझसे एग्री कर गए. बोले हाँ अनिल जी सही कह रहे हैं. एंड देन ही टर्न टुवर्ड्स मिस्टर पीयूष गोयल, हु वाज द पावर एंड कोल मिनिस्टर. ही सेड, अनिल जी सही कह रहे हैं, हमें इसे कॉम्प्रिहेंसिवली देखना होगा. एंड द मीटिंग एंडेड देयर.
एंड आफ्टर दैट मीटिंग इट वाज सेड टू यू कि भाई आपने ये कैसे बोल दिया?
It was not said on that occasion, it was much later.
Another disagreement over health insurance.
Yes, that was my last meeting with the PM. That's why I say that in my first meeting I had a disagreement with him. He agreed with me.
That was an amiable disagreement. In the second meeting you argued over health insurance and he wasn't that happy.
No, what had happened was, for 3 years the government had been trying to come up with a replacement for Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, which was perceived to be a health insurance scheme of the previous government. So after struggling for 3 years...
Which you had actually birthed.
Yeah, long ago, 2008. Yes. So the Principal Secretary to Prime Minister rang me up. He said, Anil, आज शाम को Prime Minister से हम लोग health insurance discuss कर रहे हैं. तुम आके जरा brief कर दो. तो I was a bit surprised because I was then holding the charge of Secretary School Education. तो मैंने कहा साहब मैं तो स्कूल देख रहा हूँ, मेरा क्या... बोले नहीं हम लोग पिछले 3 साल से कोशिश कर रहे हैं और समझा नहीं पा रहे हैं हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस को, और प्राइम मिनिस्टर थोड़ा नाराज हुआ था इंश्योरेंस का नाम सुन के, तो देखो अगर तुम बता सको उनको. तो मैंने कहा साहब मेरी डांट पड़वाएंगे? तो हंसने लगे, बोले नहीं तुम आओ. तब मैंने कहा कि साहब मेरा लोकल स्टैंड क्या है? बोले ऐसा करते हैं कि आज हेल्थ का है रिव्यू, हम एजुकेशन का भी रख देते हैं और तुम्हें बुलाया जाएगा, अगर तुमसे पूछते हैं प्राइम मिनिस्टर तो बता देना. हमने कहा ठीक. शाम को हम लोग पहुंचे करीब 7 बजे करीब, अगेन एट हिज रेजिडेंस. हम लोग 7-8 लोग थे, इंक्लूडिंग द देन फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर मिस्टर अरुण जेटली. The health secretary was there. She made a presentation on health insurance again. And after the presentation, the Prime Minister didn't look very happy. And then he turns towards me, Anil, आप रहे हैं हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस पर, आपने देखा, आपकी क्या राय है? और मेरी राय एग्जैक्टली वही थी जो हेल्थ सेक्रेटरी ने कही थी. तो मैंने उनको समझाया, 15 मिनट में बोला और एक टक मुझे सुनते रहे. जनरल इंप्रेशन अबाउट द PM is that he speaks a lot. In meetings he doesn't. And he's a very patient listener. He didn't interrupt me. I spoke for 15 minutes and I said exactly the same thing that the health secretary had said. Of course, I gave him a very solid reason why insurance should be. He listened to me. At the end of it, he said, Anil ji, aap sahi keh rahe hain. That day, Ayushman Bharat was born. Of course, it was christened later on, but that day. So when I was coming out of the room, one of the joint secretaries of the PMO, who was present in the meeting, he asked me, sir, आपको तो पता था नाराज हो जाते हैं हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस का नाम सुन के, इंश्योरेंस का नाम, आपने फिर भी वही बात कह दी. मैंने कहा देखो यार, मुझे ना उनसे आज कुछ लेना है, ना रिटायरमेंट के बाद कुछ लेना है. जो मैंने उचित समझा उनको बता दिया, नहीं समझ में आता कोई बात नहीं. As I said, this was of course the last year of my career. It was in March and I retired in June. But much before that, it's a question of habit that you develop and you can't change it
You're outspoken and you can't help that.
You can use that word outspoken. I said
or you
what
just
I...
speak your mind.
Yes.
Now, your book chronicles your encounters with different politicians. Among them, two prime ministers I would like to talk a little bit more about than the others because you actually worked with them. Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh.
I didn't work with them.
Well, not with them, but you had a chance to work in the government at a high level when they were Prime Minister. Let me phrase myself accurately. आपने मोदी साहब के साथ जो दो encounters हुए, आपने बताया उनके बारे में. You can see Prime Minister Modi in shades of grey. You can see his plus points, and you also speak about how demonetization in some ways was a turning point in your perception of him.
Yes, I had a great time when I was school secretary with the Prime Minister. In fact, he recognized me in front of 100 secretaries. He used to host this quarterly tea with secretaries. And in one of them, he mentioned my name. He said, "Dekhiye Anil ji ne kitna badhiya kaam kiya coal block auction mein." He was very fond of me.
Yeah.
And I distinctly recall he is very impressed with the technology that I was using for coal block auction. Ours was one of the very few offices that had gone totally digital. So we didn't have paper or files in coal ministry. He was very attracted to it. And then he used to keep asking me about ki aur kya kar raha hai technology mein. So I had a great relationship with him. But I mean, that's my perception of him. Something went wrong after demonetization. I can't put my finger what went wrong. Because, I found him losing his cool. He used to get very angry on occasions. After demonetization.
You're saying before demonetization, he was a much calmer leader.
Much calmer, much more decisive. We used to joke. I remember we were sitting in a meeting till about 8:30 in the evening. And then he had his iPad or whatever pad in front of him.
And he's quite a tech buff.
He's a tech buff. And he said, "अरे बड़ा लेट हो गया अपनी घड़ी की तरफ. आप लोगों को तो घर जाना होगा. मुझे क्या है, मैं तो घर जाऊंगा तो मैं इसी के साथ खेलूंगा." These are the terms that he used. He put everyone at ease.
Yeah.
So everyone came out. Post demonetization, I don't know what happened. I'm just putting post demonetization because that's where I saw the change. He became tentative. He became aggressive. I think he became insecure as well. And all this was...
I mean, he's electorally powerful. His popularity ratings I remain high.
As I said, I can't put my finger on it, but this is what I observed. And another thing which I noted was, Mr. Arun Jaitley played a very important role in making him what he was. He was a troubleshooter. He was the man who was solving problems for him.
He also had friends across
Absolutely.
the aisle.
Mr. Arun Jaitley reminded me of whatever little I saw of Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee.
Consensus builder.
He's a consensus builder. I walked away with all the credit for coal block auction. I think a lot of credit goes to Arun Jaitley. Now, he was not my minister. Here was a guy who was interacting with people like Naveen Patnaik, Mamata Banerjee, opposition chief ministers, bringing them on board. I've written in my books that this is what is required. We can't have a war with the state governments. We have to get them along. Arun Jaitley did that.
So you believe that post-demonetization and post-Arun Jaitley, something changed in Prime Minister Modi?
I would believe that because he had such a calming influence on him. And he was one of the very few guys who could openly disagree with him or give him advice. For example, I was in favor of commercial auction of coal mines. Right? My minister wasn't. He said, "Kuch bawal ho jayega." I said, "Sir, dekhenge bawal kya hoga." So I remember in a informal discussion, PM, Arun Jaitley, Mr. Piyush Goyal and myself. And Arun Jaitley comes up with this. He asked me, in a discussion, it came about commercial mining. Arun Jaitley says, कि सर ये अनिल जी सही कह रहे हैं कि अभी करा लीजिए, चुनाव के आसपास इसको नहीं करा पाएंगे. And Prime Minister agreed with me. Agreed with Arun Jaitley. But that file never moved. The file was sitting with the minister. It moved after 5 years. So imagine if this commercial mining had happened earlier. So Arun Jaitley played a very, very important role.
So you have been impressed with the Prime Minister in his decisiveness, in his ability to listen, but you feel that something changed.
Let me explain this to you. It's difficult to find such a decisive leader. Because as you were mentioning, though I'd never worked with Manmohan Singh, I could perceive the indecision at that level.
The book describes Dr. Manmohan Singh to be non-existent in phases.
Yes.
Not existent.
I used to...
What do you mean by that? Do you mean his leadership was not existent?
No, he was as a person. He was a low-profile person. I'm not saying it's good, bad, or ugly, but a prime minister has to be present. He has to be visible. May not be as visible as some others are, but you have to be there. You have to be a great communicator. You may be an expert, but if you are unable to convey to your team your intention, what you want to do, it has to be very visible. Some people don't realize it. You can be a quiet expert. You can be a quiet finance minister, but you can't be a quiet prime minister. You have to engage with people. You have to motivate people. I mean, it's not that there was anything wrong with him. That was his temperament. That is what he was. I would say that he was a great expert, but I won't call him a great leader, which I would call Mr. Modi. Mr. Modi may not be that great an expert, but he's a great leader. He motivates people. He takes people along. He's decisive. He's perceptive. So was Mr. Manmohan Singh. He's very perceptive, but he couldn't push things. Even if he wanted to push things, he was not a pusher. Test Modi on that. If he likes an idea, he'll push it and take it to the logical conclusion.